Many of you guys have seen this really sweet Lotus Espirit in the background, and now we're going to do a video taking a look at why it's here, and it's very broken. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Wizard Shop, and today's video is sponsored by FlexiSpot. And this is a 1990 Lotus Espirit Turbo. You guys have seen Bill's 94 Lotus Espirit Turbo S4S in the shop, which has way more power than this one. This one's a few years, 3 or 4 years earlier. It still has quite a bit of power. It actually came in here not running. The customer was going to drive it up onto a trailer or possibly drive it here. And the same thing happened, just like in the Audi, just like actually several vehicles this month. The day of that they're going to bring the vehicle, they go to start it, and it'll just crank forever. It won't start. I always heard from my mentor years ago, when problems come into the shop, they always come in threes. If you get a bad water pump, you can bet 2 more are coming. And I thought, that's impossible. That doesn't happen that way. But over the years, I have found it always happens that way. It's so strange. How does 3 different people from 3 different states with 3 different cars all have the same problem all at once? It's really weird. A couple years ago, we actually had what we called head gasket row back there. We just had lined up head gaskets. It was very strange. We'll take a look around this car, and then I'll go get Grimes. We're going to talk about all the broken things we found, and the list is getting longer the more we look. So although this thing does have some mechanical issues, it's actually in pretty good shape. The paint is nice. It's a beautiful red color. If we come around to the side, you can see it's got a really sweet body line to it. We've had several people, parts deliveries and things, guys come into the shop, and they're just like, wow, that is so cool. I haven't seen one of those before. Here we are at the corner view. You can see, obviously it's not rusted because most of this stuff is fiberglass, but many of you probably had posters on your wall as a kid of a Lotus Espirit Turbo, and here is one here in the shop. Taillights are in good shape. The body really is in really good shape, and the paint is very nice. Let's jump into the interior and let Mrs. Wizard give you guys a tour around.
Okay, ladies and gents, a hard view right now because the steering wheel is sort of turned and it gives it a definite challenge. We're peeking through the hole there to see our gauge cluster, but it has a lovely wood surround. And if I can get in there enough, you can see that it says 37,078 miles. Not sure if that's going to trip around or not. I doubt it because this is presenting very well. There's been a little bit of cracking in the lacquer, and a little bit of the lacquer is actually chipped off. But otherwise, it's in great shape. The wood isn't curling and hasn't actually just fallen off. But a lovely gauge cluster back there that we can kind of see at a weird angle. If we move up, it's got an interesting dash. This dash obviously is going over the gauge clusters and all that. But then it goes flat, just like the hood up there. Has a locking glove box, which is not locked. And if we look in there, not a lot going on. They have added a new stereo, a Continental stereo, much more modern than 1990. Love the very retro HVAC controls right there. Got another hidey hole here, very tiny, very short, but 'tis there. If we look, everything is a very lovely camel leather, and the leather is in pristine shape for the age. No rips, no tears. It's in really good condition. A little bit of bolster on the side of that seat, just enough to keep you hugged in to the car. If you look, we have a cigarette lighter on this side with the ashtray open. Let's see if we can get the camera over there. There we go. And if we look at the driver's door, we see that we've got controls for our windows, both sides, our mirror, and a lovely cigarette lighter, and the ashtray as well. In the center section between the seats, there is no map holder in the door, so I guess maybe they put this section here for that. And we've got a nice little hidey hole down there as well. Not a lot going on, just a little bit of bits and debris. There is no back seat, but we do have a lovely view of that engine, which we'll see up close in just a moment. So that's it. There's not a lot to this Lotus because, well, it's a 2-seater and it's from 1990. They did not have too many bells and whistles they added at that time. And you can see definitely the steering wheel is turned Otherwise, it would say Lotus the right way, but the gyroscope in my gimbal will not let me do that. I'm so sorry. But I'm curious what the engine's looking like, and I'd love to hear what's actually going on with this car besides that fuel pump.
Let's go ahead and get this engine bay opened up here. We see a turbo 2.2 liter intercooled 4-cylinder. A little under 300 horsepower. Bill's is over 300, like 375 or 380, but still that's a lot of power from the engine. When this one came in though, it wouldn't even run. So what did you find out when we tried to start it? It wouldn't start.
Wouldn't start. We had no fuel pressure. So did a little bit of testing, determined that, well, first off we found that the fuel pump wiring had been modified. Repaired that, still couldn't get the pump to come on, so we went ahead and replaced the pump. Luckily, it cross-references to I think it was like a Camaro or something that we looked at. It was just a GM fuel pump.
A Delphi pump, yeah.
Yeah. Dropped in there, got it running, got it started. It was making some really horrible noises from what we found out. The water pump was actually seized. So this thing had sat for so long with, mix of water and coolant and whatever that everything just kind of rusted up inside, and the bearings and the impeller were completely shot. Water pump was leaking, so...
Definitely. So it's up and running again. It was definitely a fuel pump, but there was a lot more other issues that needed to be addressed. Let's go over to our handy-dandy FlexiSpot table, and we'll see some of those parts that we took off. Oh, let me move this stuff off here. I was working on an estimate for one of Hoovie's cars. The FlexiSpot desk is great. I can sit at it with their chair that has more settings than a scan tool has. Super comfortable when writing those long estimates. I can even change positions so I can show you what problems the Lotus had. Now that it's the perfect height, I don't have to stoop over all the time like stationary desks. I can simply walk up to it and get to work. Plus, it's super easy to set up, and this thing is so sturdy that I'm not afraid to load it down with heavy car parts. I know you're thinking it's made of cheap particle board and it's super expensive. You're wrong. FlexiSpot has a 15-year warranty for their desk and a 30-day free return service. FlexiSpot desks are reasonably priced, but to help out even more, my viewers can get an extra $30 off select items on orders $500 or more by using code CWIZARD. The link is in the description below. Now let me show you what we found on the Lotus. So once we got the Lotus running, we got the fuel pump situation solved. It allowed us to start the engine and only discover more problems. The customer stated that the water pump was leaking, but there was a lot more going on, huh?
Yeah.
This is what's left of the water pump when we did a service on it. You don't really buy a whole water pump on a Lotus. You rebuild the one you have.
You can't buy them.
Yeah, you can't buy them.
That's the problem.
And let's take a look at this bearing. This is really bad. Look at that, guys. It's almost eat through the entire shaft there. And this bearing should roll smoothly independently of the shaft. It doesn't do anything.
Basically locked up, and I think that's where all of our accessory drive noise was coming from, because the belt wasn't on the AC compressor when we got here.
And here's the impeller. It's pretty rusty and crusty.
Yeah, and you could, inside the water pump housing itself, you could actually see where these veins had just sat for a while. So this thing rusted pretty much in place.
Pretty much in place.
And it took, actually having to drill and tap into this, because you see I chipped it there trying to pull it off with a regular puller, but had to drill and tap it and use a puller with bolts.
It was on that hard, huh?
Yeah, it was real bad.
So the water pump situation is solved. One of the complaints the customer had was the AC was inoperable, and we found why. This is the old compressor off of the Lotus, and you can see that the front portion is basically, it just barely wants to turn.
Yeah, it'll move just a little bit side to side, but yeah, it's locked pretty much solid in place.
It's locked up pretty hard.
Yeah. And then when we did the water pump, we had to pull the timing belt, and that's when I discovered that even though the timing belt had been recently replaced as far as mileage goes, just years and years of sitting, the belt started to separate. So we opted to go ahead and throw a new timing belt in there.
After Grimes showed me this timing belt, I kind of looked at it, and I kind of got an idea of what happened here. It's like a cut where someone tried to roll on the timing belt to get it to go on, and it's a really sharp cut, like a gear. It dug in pretty deep. Would it have broken? Would it have lasted? I don't know, but it's definitely not a car that we want to take a chance on. So we actually got a blue belt off of a Nissan 300ZX. Let's go take a look under the hood real quick. I'll show you. It's installed. It's actually running now. So there you can see the blue timing belt, and it went on perfectly, didn't it?
Yep.
Perfect size, perfect length, everything. The cogs, the teeth, everything is perfect. But what you see there is there's no timing belt cover. There's nothing covering it, and that's stock. That's the way they are. Isn't it strange?
It is a little bit odd. I suppose, you know, it being pretty well protected at the rear of the car doesn't really make it a necessity. But yeah, it does strike me as odd seeing them completely exposed like that, and there's no timing covers whatsoever. It's top to bottom exposed.
Yep, it's totally out in the open. And we can also take a look down here and see the new compressor. There you can see the new compressor is installed.
Yep, I actually have to modify that pigtail because they have a male connector on the harness side and a male connector on the compressor side, so I've just got to get a female connector on one of them.
Okay. So is it odd that a Lotus uses so many different parts on it from different makes and different companies? No, a lot of automakers do that even today. But especially in the days of the early 80s, 90s, a lot of English companies, whether it be Jaguar or Land Rover or Lotus, they use Motorcraft parts, General Motors parts, they use Denso parts. There's so many different brands of things they use, off-the-shelf parts, which actually is great because here we are today, we can get Delphi pumps from a Camaro that works on the Lotus. It's the identical part number, so it makes it a lot easier. Huge thanks to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to use my code CWIZARD to get an additional $30 off select items on orders over $500 with the link in my description. If you're curious what kind of tools we use to work on this Lotus or any other vehicle in the shop, we have our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and we really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button because there's many more cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.